Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another morning of RIPT, brought to you by the Sports Science Institute of South Africa in partnership with Total Sports. So, before we get started, for those of you who joined us last week, you will have a fairly good idea of what you can expect. For the newcomers to this week's class, we are going to be covering a series of functional and bodyweight movements. It will be scaled, so whether you have previous experience with exercise or not, you should be able to get to the class. Please make sure that if you have any shoulders, lower back or knee niggles, you are following the advice of your physiotherapist or biokineticist, and you modify the exercises that I'm going to be demonstrating to your needs. If you do feel any pains, please do not try to push through the movement. It's safer to just stop the movement if it is causing pain. So before we get started with our warm-up, what we'll need for the class today is a relatively heavy backpack. The backpack can be 5 to 10 kgs. It just needs to have a solid strap and you should be able to carry it over your shoulders. You'll also need a broomstick, so any form of a dowel stick or wooden piece of plank that you can hold onto your sides like that. We'll keep overhead. If you don't have a broomstick nearby, you can always use a towel, a large towel, to add for some length. We'll also need a water bottle and a sweat towel. So once you have all of your equipment, we'll get started with our warm-up. If you do need to quickly run around to fetch those, you've got 5 minutes before we get started with the first bit of the movement prep. So, for those of you ready to start, we'll start off with skipping. If you don't have skipping ropes, just pretend that you've got skipping ropes in your hand and we'll hop on the spot. You can keep your arms moving just for a little bit of rhythm. And from here we'll gently move side to side. So it's just a little bit of a movement to the side, not too much. Good, and back to the normal skipping, and you can relax. We'll pop the skipping ropes down. If you're using skipping ropes, we'll just go into a little bit of a jog. It's just jogging on the spot. You don't need to run too hard or too fast. And from here, we transition to butt kicks. Good, and you can relax. So now that we've got our breathing rate up, our heart rate should have also risen a little bit. What we'll do is continue with our muscular warm-up, so getting the muscles woken up. In our first bit, we are pulling our shoulder blades together at the back as we open up the chest, and the movement must be a diagonal pattern. So pulling the shoulder blades together at the back as we open up, we'll go for 5 per side. So you've got your own count of 5 per side. Once we finish with that, we'll go into some leg swings. So some of you might struggle with balance for this one. You can always hold on to an object. If you can, you're standing on one leg as you're swinging your leg forward and all the way back. You can use your hands to help with balance. And it's just a simple movement all the way forward, all the way back. You should feel a little bit of a stretch in the hamstrings, that's the back of your thigh, as well as in the quads, and the hip flexors, that's the front of your thigh. Moving over to the other leg. So once again, this is just 5 to 10 of each, depending on the speed that you're moving. Good. After that, we'll go into a hip hinge movement. So it's called Y-ups. Basically, the hip hinge comes from this area here, where we're focusing on pushing our hips backwards. Our knees stay relatively straight, so that we feel a little bit of a stretch in the hamstrings. The idea will be to keep our thumbs pointed upwards, our hands in front of us and elbows locked out. We will hinge with your hips, so you're pushing your hips backwards, keeping your back nice and straight. Shoulders are locked back, so actually want to try hide them in opposite back pockets. And from there, we lift our hands as high as possible, stop, and then you push your hips forward to stand. And that will create the Y shape. So we're looking to perform 5 of those. If you struggle with the hip hinge movement, you can just stand next to a couch or wall, and you're actually aiming to touch the couch or wall with your butt. So you must make sure that it's the hips that move backwards. You're not just standing on the spot and leaning forward with your chest. So you actually want your hips to move backwards like that. Right, so we'll go for 5, moving at your own time. Lock the shoulders back, lift the hands, and we stand from there. So as we push our hips forward, you should feel the glutes working a little bit more. And this is just to make sure that we've warmed up the posterior chain. So that will include the back muscles and the glutes and hamstrings. Good. So while you're finishing up with that, we'll go into the next one. So for the next one, what we'll do is a judo push-up into toe touches. For the judo push-up, I'll give you 2 modifications. So you can either perform your normal judo push-up, so keeping your feet shoulder width apart in the push-up position. We're going to push our hips all the way backwards and upwards, dropping our chest to the ground. We want to lower our nose towards the ground and sweep through with the chest so that we lift the chest. If you are able to, you'll reverse the movement and go straight into your toe touch and its opposite sides. If you struggle with the reverse movement, you just go straight to the top and into your toe touches. So that will be your first modification. If you need to, you're on your knees. We go into the same movement, pushing through, lifting the chest, and from there you must reverse into touches on the opposite sides of your knees. Just remember, if you do have any shoulders or lower back issues, you need to stick to your modifications as given by your physio or biokineticist. Right, so we'll perform 5 of those. So judo push-up into the toe touch. So that's number 4. I've got 1 more. Right, so once you're finished with that, we'll go into our final movement of the movement prep. It is a movement on all 4, so we'll place our hands underneath our shoulders, our knees underneath our hips, and keep shoulder width apart and hip width apart for both sides. From here, we'll keep our toes downwards, push our chest away from the ground, and then we lift the knees off of the ground. So we'll hold this fury plank position, basically distributing our weight between our hands and feet, not the knees. In this position, we need to hold while we kick out with one leg, push through the heel, not aiming through your toes, and then we bring the knee around and start again. So we need to do 5 of those. When you are kicking out, we're not shifting the hips to the side. And when you bring your leg around, you need to keep everything around your pelvic stabilizers nice and tight so that we control the movement. We don't want to lift the hips out that way. It's just pushing the heel and bringing it around. So we'll do 5 per side. You can move at your own pace. Right, so that's our warm-up done. If you are still finishing up, you've got another 30 seconds. In the meantime, I'll start talking through our next bit. So our next bit is the primary lift section. In this area, we will be performing complex movements, and it's more about the speed of the movement and control of the movement. So when we perform these movements, it's more for maximum time under tension, as well as a rapid movement for when we're doing the Olympic lift derivatives. So starting off, I'm going to grab my weighted backpack. So for the first movement, it will be a modification of the split jerk. So obviously without an actual barbell, we need to make do with what we've got around the house. So I'm going to use a relatively heavy backpack. The split jerk involves a movement where we will perform one hand at a time. It will be a contralateral movement, so my right hand will work while my left leg ends up in front. That is where the name is split. So basically that is our landing position, and the depth at which you catch would be essentially your ability. So if we are doing a dip where we get our hips backwards into the drive, where we get our hips upwards, ending up onto our toes, we're punching at the same time, but we actually need to get our hips back down as soon as possible. So it will look something like that. We're landing in a split position. I'm essentially still directly over the starting point. So I didn't jump forward, I didn't jump backwards. My feet just split itself, and the landing foot in front will be either pointed at 12 o'clock or slightly inwards at 1 o'clock. So the movement in real speed would be something like that. We're landing, driving upwards. You'll see that there's a nice strong pillar in front, and that's directly over my head. From here, you need to stand, get your feet together, and then lower the weight. So the dip and drive of the hips will give you momentum, so it's not as heavy for your upper body to press. So to demonstrate the movement, it's dip, drive, dip. From here, we stand and bring it together. What we'll do is complete 5 on the one side, and then we'll switch over to 5 on the other side. So if you don't feel very comfortable driving the weight above your head as you go in straight into the split, just modify it so that as we dip, drive, we're slowly going into that position. You don't have to actually perform the jerk. So if you want, we will just step into that position. So it's 2 quick movements of the feet, very subtle movements though. Okay, so that will be your first exercise. We'll go through your first set, and then we'll address the next 2 exercises. So moving at your own pace, 5 per side. Okay, so for those of you doing this for the first time, you'll probably still be working through it. Don't worry about rushing through to catch up to where I am. You will have some time at the end. Rather focus on your form. Good, so those of you who are still finishing up, you'll have a couple of seconds to get through that. While I'm waiting to address the next one, just make sure that if, once again, you're pressing, you feel any shoulder niggles or lower back pains, you find a suitable modification. So by now everyone should have completed the first set. What we'll do is we'll keep our heavy weighted bag, and for this one, what we'll do is a weighted pistol squat. So if you do feel you need to, you'd rather perform a sit to stand where you're sitting down into a chair or the couch behind you. Make sure that you're not putting unnecessary stress through your knee by carrying an extra weight as well. So for the weighted pistol squats, we'll keep the bag nice and close. Just make sure it's kept higher up so it doesn't get obstructed by the movement of your knee. So with the pistol squat, we're keeping all our weight onto our back foot. You'll find that with the weight, it actually helps with balance because you can use it as a counterbalance by pushing it away from your chest. But just make sure that you are in full control of the movement. You don't want your knee dancing side to side as you're sitting down. Your knee must always follow the line of your toes. So as we're moving, keeping the shoulders back, we're sitting as low as possible. If you find that's the lowest depth you can, you'll complete your pistol squat to that depth. If you can, you're sitting as low as possible. Get down to the bottom, control the movement up. So it's always a slow and controlled movement, all the weight going through your heel so that we can get the glutes to work. If you need to, keep your front foot down onto the ground to help with balance, because the last thing you want is to be falling over to the side and you try save the movement by pushing through the leg and you end up hurting your knee. So like I said, your modification will be either sitting into a chair and it's controlled at all times. Down and then up. So we'll perform 5 per side and then get through our third exercise. Good stuff. So some of you are still finishing up with that one. Remember, if you were sitting in a chair, try to control the movement all the way down. Do not collapse into the seat. So going into our third movement for the primary lift, we'll pop the backpack onto our shoulders. Please make sure that the backpack is sitting properly on your back, so it's relatively high rather than low. In this movement, we need to perform a push-up with the plus. So the plus is moving your chest away from the ground as much as possible. And with this weighted push-up, it will offer a little bit of resistance for that plus. So going into your push-up position, just make sure that we keep our elbows relatively close to our torso. Keep the hips level with your shoulders. So we'll perform the push-up and then the plus. And once again, our modification on the knees, if need to. Yeah, so for that, we've got 5 repetitions. That will be exercise 3 or exercise C, and we'll be performing a set of each following up. So getting through our push-ups, it's 5. Good stuff. Have a quick water break and then we'll get through the second set. So that's 1 set down, 2 sets to go to make up our 3 sets. What I'll be doing for our second round of sets, I'll perform the modified exercise for those of you who did feel a little bit lost in the initial demonstration. So if you are comfortable with the movement, please continue in your own time. What I'll do is the modified version for each of the next exercises. So like I mentioned, it's a quick but subtle switch with the feet, not as much of a jerk. Right, so that's the contralateral split jerks. For the next one, I will do my sit to stand in the chair. So my movement always controlled with my leg. I'm not just sitting and collapsing into the chair. I'm trying to fight as much as possible, and right at the bottom, we stand from there. So it's 5 per leg. Remember, if you want, you can use a little bit of weight, but not if it's going to overload your knee. Always try to keep your hips in control of the movement. And my last one for the 5. Good stuff. So for this one, I'll do the modified push-up with plus. So I get my knees far back, keep my hips level with my shoulders, elbows stay relatively close. Let's push up into the plus. There we go, 2 sets down, final 1 to go. Have a quick water break and then you can complete your final set. So by now, everyone should feel fairly comfortable with either the normal version or the modified version. So for those of you who still feel you need some extra cues, what I'll do is just talk through this one a little bit more, and everyone else continues at their own time. So for your contralateral split jerk, it's the dip where we get our hips downwards but aiming backwards. So it's the dip there, springing onto the toes, that gives momentum to perform the press. So once again, dip, it's dip into opposite side, so it's right hand, left foot, and we're using momentum generated by the hips to drive through. So if you like, I always use the analogy of standing in a low-hanging tunnel. I can't jump upwards because the tunnel ceiling is obstructing me, so I actually need to bring my body low, and from here we'll get our hips low enough for the catch. Yeah, so moving into our weighted pistol squats. So I'll quickly just talk through this one before I grab the bag. In this position, we should feel that a little bit too much weight leaning back will cause us to fall over. That's why the front leg is going to be used as a counterbalance. So we actually want to push this forward, and it will keep your center of mass over your foot. So in that position, when I'm pushing my hips backwards, get my leg forward, and you should more or less balance your weight out. With the addition of more weight in front, it should give us more confidence to sit backwards, but please make sure you are strong enough in your knee and hip to actually control the weight downwards and upwards. So once again, we go to a certain depth that we feel that's the stopping point, and the more often we do it, the easier it becomes. So once again, going through that progression on this side. Right, almost there. Last set for our primary lifts. So the push-up with the plus. Remember, we want our chest to control the movement. Our hips should not sink downwards. The weight on your back is going to be a little bit more of a challenge for the push-up, but ideally the plus is challenged the most there. So it's actually pushing your chest as far away from the ground as possible. Good stuff. So some of you will be finishing up and you'll have a water break before we go into our next section. So you've still got a couple of seconds left of your water break. In the meantime, what I'll do is talk you through the 6 exercises that we've got lined up. So basically, our next section is a Metcon, which means that we are working to stress our metabolic system, and therefore it's called Metcon from metabolic conditioning. So ideally, what we'll do for the first exercise is sit flat on the ground. We're trying to keep our legs as straight as possible, so we actually don't want our knees to lift in that bending position. That could be an indicator that your lower back or your hamstrings are fairly tight and it actually doesn't feel comfortable sitting with straight legs. We want our chest as far forward as possible, so we're not actually sitting in that semi-reclined position, and we'll keep our weighted bag next to us so that when we perform the movement, we keep our chest forward and we're in that upright press position. So the first exercise is a single arm Z press. So a single arm sitting here, driving, but keeping everything around our pelvic stabilizers or your core muscles engaged. So basically, we're pretending that we're bearing down on the toilet or bracing ourselves for a punch in the stomach. That will allow us to keep everything tight here, chest stays forward, and punching the ceiling. So it's directly above our heads, chest stays forward. So that will be the Z press. From here, we keep our legs straight, but this time lay flat on our back. We'll hold our bag up in front of us. So the bag is a magnet towards the ceiling, which means that we're not allowed to drop it behind our heads to throw it forward. That will be cheating because that's just adding momentum. So from here, I'm sitting up, getting my chest as far forward as possible. Hands stay up because the bag is a magnet to the ceiling, and we control back down. So if you imagine a sticker being peeled off of a surface and then reapplied, that's what we want to do with our upper body. The lower body is shut off. So once again, our core stabilizers are dissociating our upper body movement from our lower body movement. That will be the first 2 exercises in the pairing. So that's set number 1. We are working through those 2, and then we'll get through the next 2. So for the next one, what we'll do is a single arm pendulum row. So if we keep our bag out to the side, we need to perform our hip hinge. So the hip hinge allows us to get our back nice and straight while the chest is as low to the ground as possible. The weight starts from outside, so it's next to you, and the idea is to lift your elbow as high as possible so that the hand is level with the chest. So in this position, I'm already locking my shoulders back. I squeeze my glutes to protect my lower back, and I pull the weight up and control back down. You'll note that it must be a movement with one side. You're not trying to row with your body like that. It's only the elbow moving up to the side and back down. From there, that's exercise 1. We'll go into exercise 2, where we're holding the bag out in front of us, semi-squat position, squeezing our glutes, and the bag is moved around our head. And then if you want, you return in the other direction, or we work one side, and then when I say it's halfway, we work in the other direction. It should make it a little bit easier to control and keep focus on the movement. So lastly, in our Metcon, our last pairing
will be a single arm kettlebell swing. So we'll use our bag. If you are using a 5 or 10 liter water bottle, please make sure that the handle is secure. So with a single arm, we start with a weight behind us. So that will allow for our hips to perform the first thrust, and that gives you momentum going forward. From there, the hand just follows the bag. We're not actually trying to lift with our shoulder. It is a hip movement, not a shoulder movement. So as the weight is coming back, we're using our hamstrings to control and then glutes to fire through again. So from behind into the front, into a swinging movement at your hips. So your back stays straight, your hips move backwards and then forwards. Slowing down, we can just slow it down on the ground. And then the exercise that will be paired with will be a high plank with a drag through, where we're just pulling the bag across. In our high plank position, we stay in all fours, so feet are shoulder width apart to help with balance. Our hips stay level and we're not rocking with the chest. So it's a drag through, which means I'm pulling across to that side, switch hands, and then I pull. You're not pushing the way through, you must always pull the way through. So the reason I explained all 6 of those exercises is so that you can work through them as quickly as possible. If you are familiar with them, it will be easy. If you are not familiar with them, just keep an eye on me. I'll be talking through each of the exercises as well as giving you a heads up of what's to come during our rest period. So what we'll be doing for this set is a 40-20 work rest interval. We're working for 40 seconds, resting for 20 seconds, and then we go through all 6 exercises like that. So basically there is a minute where we are working, then resting before the next minute of work and rest. Okay, so if you're ready, you can get started. First one will be your Z press. If you are keeping an eye on me, just make sure that you can work at my speed. Ready, and let's go. So Z press is only one side. At halfway, we change over. So this one is basically like the typical shoulder press that you are familiar with. All right, let's change over. Except the difference is it requires more core stabilizing as well as better thoracic extension. Almost there. Good, and relax. Right, in the next 20 seconds, we'll be getting ready for our weighted curl-ups. So we've got another 10 seconds before we start. I'll demonstrate once again. So it's hands up, sitting up by pushing your chest as far forward as possible, and then we back into that starting position. Getting ready, 3, 2, 1, let's go. So for this one, we work all the way through. It's 40 seconds non-stop. That's halfway. Almost there, last 10 seconds. And that's time. Right, so that's the first pairing down, 2 to go. Getting ready for our pendlay rows. We've got 10 more seconds. So once again, the pendlay row from here, hinging at your hips, chest nice and low, shoulders locked back, and we pull out on the side, 20 seconds and 20 seconds. Ready? Let's go. Always try to keep your chest down, squeeze your glutes, try to protect your lower back. Switching sides. Try to keep your shoulder blade locked back, as close to your spine as possible. Good, that's time. Another 15 seconds before we start our around the world. So arms are straight out in front of us. Semi-squat position as we bring the weight around our head. If you are going to be bouncing back in the reverse direction, you work like that all the way through. If you're switching, it's halfway. So let's go. I'll reverse, so I'll go through all the way. For those of you who are doing halfway and half, you'll go in the other direction now. Almost there. And that's time. Good, 2 down, final pairing to go. So for the final one, it's the kettlebell swings or your bag swings. You'll start off in front. We're working through our hips and the arms are just moving because of the weight of the bag. Ready? And let's go. So let's try absorb the weight with our hamstrings and then drive through with your glutes. Keep your back nice and straight. And switching. We're almost there. And relax. Right, going into our last exercise for the Metcon, the high planks. Just make sure that our hands are shoulder width apart, with our feet shoulder width apart as well, and elbows locked out with your hands directly below your shoulders. So, getting ready, and let's go. This one is the pull, so you need to make sure that we grip the bag and drag it across. Keep your hips level, we're not tilting at the hips. That's halfway, keep going. Last couple of seconds. And that's time. Well done. We're almost there. You've got a quick water break, and then we'll go into our finisher. So we've started off with a little bit of a movement prep before getting stuck into our Olympic lifts. Moving into the Metcon, which we've just finished now, and we'll wrap up with the finisher. So the finisher is essentially an empty the tank component where you're just trying to get rid of any extra energy. It varies in forms based on what the components of the Metcon and primary lifts were. So for today, we'll be working on an overhead squat, and for that you'll need your broomstick. So if you have a broomstick or a dowel stick like this, remember you can use a large towel if you don't have, with the object in your hand, nice and wide with the grip. The wider the grip, the easier it is for your upper back if you do know you've got a relatively tense upper back. And what we are doing in this position is the overhead squat. So if you joined us for last week's class, you will have gone through the overhead squat. For those of you who didn't join, I'll demonstrate to the side so that you can actually see what's happening with my hips relatively in relation to my hands. So when I'm sitting in a squat, my hips need to move backwards so that my center of mass is still above my feet, and I sit as deep as possible without curving the spine, so we're not leaning forward like that or dropping your chest forward to sit down. So ideally, you're sitting in an imaginary chair behind you. If you do struggle with mobility, it's not an issue. That will be your overhead squat position, and the more you practice, the better you'll get. So if you can't do that movement, you can always do the wall squat, which we demonstrated last week. For the wall squat, we're just placing our hands on the wall. You're standing relatively close to the wall, and from there, we are sitting in a squat, the wall prevents you from leaning forward. So that would be your first step of learning how to perform the overhead squat. For our finisher, what we need to do is 5 squats. On the 5th squat, we hold for 5 seconds and then you perform another round. What we'll do is 3 minutes as many times as we can. And the idea is if you get to 5 sets, you're all done. If you only get to 2 sets and you're starting to work your 3rd, but we've run out of the 3 minutes, that's it. That will be your time cap. So we're not expecting you to get through all 5 sets. All we want to do is get through the movement correctly. So once again, in our overhead position, it's 5 squats as deep as possible. And then the 5th one, you'll hold for 5 seconds. So that's 4. And the 5th one, I'm holding. Because I am able to sit down right to the ground, it doesn't require as much energy from my thighs. However, if you are only squatting to that depth, when you hold, you feel that your thighs are working a lot harder because they actually have to hold your weight up. Okay, so when you are ready, grab your towel or dowel stick and then we'll get started. Going in 3, 2, 1. So we've got either 5 sets or 3 minutes to get through. The idea is we're working as quickly as possible, aiming to finish our 5. Just try to keep an eye on your time. If you did start at a different time to me, if you are able to work at my pace, we'll just keep going. That's 5. Just try to control the bottom position so we're not just bouncing upwards from the bottom. So that's 3 down. Some of you will feel a little bit of a burn in your thighs now, especially if you are holding that overhead position, but we're almost there. And this is the final set of 5. If you're working at my speed, you'll see that the time is just over 1 minute, so it's not actually taking that long. Therefore, everyone should be able to get through their 5 sets within the 3 minutes. And well done. Good stuff. Cool. So, if you are still finishing up, we've got a couple of seconds. If you manage to get through your 5 sets, have a quick drink of water, and then we'll go through a very, very quick and easy stretch, and that will be the rip class for this morning. So for those of you ready to finish up with our stretch, what we'll do is just grab a seat on the ground. We're going to bring one foot in, try to drop the knee out to the side while we reach over to the foot. Holding for a couple of seconds. From here, we will progress the stretch. So it's quite simple, holding on the same side. What you want to do now is try reach with the opposite hand. And then bring that bent knee across, turning to the side. You can use your elbow to drive into your knee. You should feel a little bit of a stretch here in your glutes as well as your low back. Repeating on the other side, so starting off with the same side. So for those of you who enjoyed that, you can find out more information on our website, that's ssisa.com. Otherwise, you can check out our Facebook page, which is Sports Science Institute of South Africa, and you'll be able to find more details on the ripped class, as well as information about our CISA app. So the CISA app gives you options of different types of classes, and will be great for you to get started if you are hesitant about working out without instruction or the appropriate means of what you're meant to be doing and how you're meant to be doing it. We'll switch over to the other side. Good. Going across the body again. From here, what we'll do is get into all fours, point your toes away from your body, sit as far back as you can with your hips, and reach as far forward with your hands as possible. From here, we'll walk the hands over to the right. And then over to the left. Back to the middle, we'll lift our hips up, flatten our heels, and walk your hands towards our feet. Great stuff, everyone. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Once again, my name is Rodet, and I'll see you next week. Cheers.